Hey everybody, this is Yvonne, and I'm doing something different, and I'm gonna post it, and I'm hoping that it pushes at 5:30. But this is different, and this is something new for me. Um, However, today's topic is perception versus perspective, and my purpose behind doing perception versus perspective, discovering ourselves, is because we're moving into a digital world. In this digital world, it is creating our life and it's doing something different in our world, and it's allowing us to view things from a different perception and view it from a different perspective, a different vantage point. I hope I hope that my internet doesn't stop or stops pausing. However, going forward, before I dive into this, and this is new, so just be patient with me. I have a mentor, and she says, "Do it scared," so I'm gonna do this thing scared. Before I give you all the dynamics of what's going on with perception versus perspective, allow me to share with you the definitions of perception and perspective. Perception is the ability to see or become aware of something through the senses, a way of regarding, understanding, or interpreting something, a mental impression. Some in the church would say discern. Living in a church world, they have a way of saying things, and they'll say, I discern the spirit. And they may. Perspective is the art of drawing solid objects on a two-dimensional surface to give the right impression of their height, width, depth, and position in relation to each other when viewed from a point. Perception is in our mind, and perspective is pushed out. We have it's a movie called Vantage Point, and it replays a story. Therefore, it allowed people to give their perspective or vantage point of how they viewed a particular bombing. As we trace our history, we have grounded ourselves in our perspective based on our experiences. However, many refuse to move away from perceptions or perspectives and prejudge a situation that may or may not be true. Because my entire motive for woman to woman as well as single moms is to understand who we are and be able to connect without assuming anything that seeks to unite Black sisters is good. Because for so long, we've lived on an island with our own perception, drawing our own conclusion, reaching for a narrow perspective, and assuming our light skinned sisters are bougie or our loud sisters have no class. The reasons why I chose Loud Sisters because I found a peer-reviewed article by Lindy L. Johnson, and she wrote, "Oh, she did a research. Oh, those loud Black girls." This research was based on lived experience of Black girls who talk with an attitude. She stated she did not grow up in the ghetto life with Sister Soldier. She attended a public high school whose student population was majority African American, and their language was different. Their walk, talk, and act was different. They engaged different. They connected different. And based off of differences, she felt like or assumed or perceived that those Black girls allowed, never understanding that those Black girls were not raised in an environment like she was in. As she matriculated through the HBCU, historically realized that their walk and talk was based on how they were raised. Their communication was based on how their environment shaped them. Had she never found out? Would she have been able to connect with her Black sisters? Probably not. Because when our perception is skewed, we internalize it and we move away and continue to venture out, and we still discern or prejudge situations, never to find out our reasons why. Furthermore, we can sit on our porches, streets, and roads and the things that we have traveled in life. And we view society and regions based on where we have not been. Our perceptions and perspectives become who we are, but with a more narrow view. If we thought like Lindy did prior to doing the research or even getting to know her Black sisters, we either assume or we can find out the facts. As I continue to read this article, I have a great admiration for Dr. Prentice Berry because she tells colorful stories. Her stories are so colorful that you're engaged from the beginning to the end because you never know where she's going with them. Her colorful stories are something like a 5-minute story where she talked about doing the inner work. Our inner work, she saw a thing. However, she perceived what she thought and knew was not true. This story was about a couple, husband and wife, corn and butter. Now, how did she become so encapsulated with this, what she saw, but it wasn't true? Well, the husband asked the wife to get up and go to the refrigerator, and she failed in her judging, thinking that he was being demanding or abusive. Dr. Berry soon found out the real story. Do you know when we understand, when we don't do a full scope of understanding what's going on, we gain a false perception of what something is. We gain self-awareness based off of our own perception, and it doesn't decrease the conflict. But when we gain self-awareness based on asking the right questions, wondering if it's us, doing the right self-awareness talk, we walk away with the right answers. As a takeaway, when one can admit to themselves what their internal problems are, they can work through their life and become keenly aware of identifying issues. In the beginning, had Dr. Berry asked before assuming, what could have come out of that entire story? Her feelings would not have been different. She would not have felt different. And assuming anything will increase the conflict. And if we wait for the facts, we can decrease the conflict. It takes two to create conflict. And if one is creating a conflict that is not there, something is going on inside of that person that's bringing the conflict to the table without first asking questions. How many times have you reached a conclusion based on what you may think third party information? We all have. How often have you been? We all have. This is a false perception. And if you ground that perception, you make it a two-dimensional object and it becomes your perspective. You stand on that work, you stand on that groundwork, you don't move from your opinion, you never do the research, you continue to read things that are shaped based off of how you think, and never challenge yourself to move forward. All of that concluded is based off of your experiences. You now place pen to paper to what you saw even when you hear the story. You build a thesis. You write a full dissertation with no facts and stereotype it. Label it, pigeonhole it. All that you publish becomes a negative view or positive view, depending on how you think and how you see things. Because of who you are on the inside or something you have encountered is in your present or past, is how you deliver what you see. What you see, you deliver it, you push it out, and it becomes your view without question. You build a false perception that can be bad and hurt a person. And you can still build a false perception and it can be good and help a person. And both of those perceptions in your mind and perspectives can be totally what could be right about a person. When you build factual evidence, the truth comes out of it. False perceptions and continue to or result from stereotypes and labels. Moreover, stereotypes are pervasive. People of all walks of life can be the victims of perpetrators and stereotypes. Stereotypes, however, are also visible when people may expect them the least. How so? We form our judgment or perception or perspective based on what we see and what we hear. Phoebe Dickerson said, stereotypes, however, are also visible where people may expect them least. I have a question, and this is something you can take away. How do we label people, places, and things correctly? The answer: ask or watch long enough without wondering, and the answer will soon reveal itself who a person, place, or thing is. Just wait, or just simply ask. What am I trying to say in all of this? When you live in a digital world like Facebook and all the content we see from self-help, raising awareness on racism, religion, isms, how to get a man, and this new WAP, that's funny, is pushed out. One will gain a perception of who the developer, speaker, or person is without knowing the full person. Many develop a thought based on what they heard or what feelings a person has towards themselves. No matter how the presenter presents it, all that one sees is one thing. When you have a low sense of security about yourself, you will often perceive the worst for something. When you have a high sense of security about yourself, you will often find out what the situation is instead of assuming. Testimony. I took several science classes in school because I was on the more advanced side. Most of my life, I dissected everything, even the mud pies that I used to play with outside as a kid. I was always appeared to be weird because I was quiet. I talked a lot, but on the inside, my soul was very, very quiet, very, very deep, and always thinking. Through life, it remained that way, even when I decided to drop out of school 2 weeks before graduation. There was a prom dress waiting in the cleaners, a graduation gown waiting for me in the office, and my GPA was a 3.4. All of what I did not understand and walked out, never looking back. Before that day, my goal was to become a psychologist because of what I experienced in my childhood and all that I saw in my classmates I could relate to. They lived in fancy homes, and because of the home that I lived in was fancy to me, coming from a more impoverished community, and all I wanted to see was a reality and not unrealistic views. Living in a home with two parents, seeing friends with two parents, but I saw an unrealistic view of what family was. When one does not understand their reality, it makes it hard for people to connect. Unrealistic people normally can't connect with realistic people. Realistic people will still try to connect, but it's up to the unrealistic person building their perception on the realistic person that does not connect them together. So I remain in my introverted world with an extroverted sense of personality. Although I talk a lot, I can smile a lot, put together the brightest platforms, I'm still a homebody. I prefer to be alone more so than I prefer to be in a crowd. I'm that girl. It doesn't matter if you ask or not. Because if I want to go, I'm going to ask you, can I go? Normally, my friends know I'll invite myself and they'll say, come on, let's go. However, that's just who I am. But because I could see people based on what I learned about them, I never perceived them to be a certain way and formed hard conclusions. I was quiet, I watched, and I moved around. This is probably a gift God gave me. Moreover, when I saw their false reality, I remained friends, but only at a distance. Perception is something that will become a new normal for a long time because of social distancing due to COVID-19. And we will have our perspective or outcome. Will we assume things based on who we are within? Will we give ourselves a chance to love and tear down those low insecurities? Will we form new friends from a digital world and draw near to those who are like us? I'm a realist, so I tend to draw towards people who are not superficial. I read real books, and it is hard for fictional books to gain my attention based on what it could be centered around. Now, if the book is fictional and is centered around behavior, I'll probably gravitate towards it. Because of our world, we will focus a lot on the digital world. Churches on digital world. You can find a TV show. You know, we have these Amazon Fire Sticks. That's a digital world because it's coming into our TV not from cable but through just a digital cordless stick. You know, who would imagine that we could go order Disney Plus and watch Hamilton, cancel the subscription, and not want to look at Disney Plus anymore? So we have cable at the palms of our hands. If one is not aware of the red flags and all that is going on around them, one will paint false perceptions and create false perspectives and sink into something that they are not aware of. Their self awareness will become self centered, and one will center it on becoming and they won't center it on becoming their best version of themselves. When one becomes more aware, they will try their best to make the best version of themselves. Your best version will look like what Dr. Patrice Berry did. She asked the couple. The couple was too busy in life to have that one-on-one because of their careers. So dinner time was the only time that they could try to role play and just be intimate with one another. Had she not asked? And now Dr. Patrice Berry has a relationship with this couple. When we perceive or gain our own front porch view, it limits how we grow. Dr. Patrice discovered something different. Her perception changed, and I'm sure her perspective did as well. As we close out into this thing, I want to give you 5 points on how to give yourself more self-care, self-help, and gain a better perspective. Get quiet, and then you can see. Observe and discover you. Realize in your quietness who you truly are. There are no distractions, just me and my quiet moment, you and your quiet moment. Number 2, discover what is good about you. Do your best to refine what's good and become an expert at being what you know good is. Learn a little bit more. Get to know a little bit more people. Gain a mentor, someone you have to talk to every single day, but someone you know that you can trust and that can pour into you to give you a brighter insight. Assess relationships. Who are you in relationship with now that's valuable for your future? Are you hanging on to closed-minded people that perceive or have narrow perspectives? Their vantage point is off and they're not willing to see from the right and would only see from the left. Quiet moments can lead us to know who we are. It eliminates our false perceptions and helps us to gain a proper perspective. As I close, just to give you a little bit of psychology today, they stated, thinking we are right in our perception may be an illusion, and I believe it. Discerning is a thing, but I do believe spirits connect. Trauma bonding is real. Therefore, people sometimes resist altering their perception, believing they are right in what they hear, see, and remember. The truth is that perceptions are often inaccurate and particularly emotionally charged situations. This is how you build stereotypes and conclude what is not. They also stated leaning in can expand your worldview. What they mean by leaning in is how I relate it to coming off the front porch in a river or ocean, going somewhere different, doing something different, and seeing the world from a different perspective other than your deck, or reading a different book other than just your normal book. Perspective is often pushed out, and when we push it out, it becomes projected on other people. Nevertheless, we have a uniquely valuable perspective of life, a lens through which we interpret our lives. We define what makes sense to us through our perspective. The lack of exposure, the narrower the perspective. The higher the exposure, or the broader the exposure, the broader the view, the higher the view. When we get to a mountain or a tall building, we can see the city. But from where we sit in our homes, if we're living inside of a city, we can just see the building and not what's above the building. If we can take away one thing from this little self-reflection and attempt to discover ourselves, will you process how to lean in to see the world from someone else's lens instead of your own, so that you may be able to step inside their shoes and gain compassion and humility fully? If that will not happen, you run the risk of remaining on the front porch and continue to assume and discern as the church world does. Try your best not to lose sight of how to help others, and try your best to stop assuming what is not. Ask yourself, do you live in a narrow view of the world, or do you live in a broader view of the world? How you see yourself is how you will answer that question. Thank you all for these 22 minutes. This is my first, and I appreciate you for your time and your attention.